Thank you everybody for joining. This is the session where we're going to be talking about how to make a team successful. And you might be asking yourselves, who am I and why do I dare to talk about the topic? So that's a valid question, what I think we should be starting with. So to start with, I am not a PowerPoint fan, but you'll be seeing PowerPoint here. I would prefer to speak without the slides because that's what I do in real public. But the question on why PowerPoint, I also have terrible memory. So if I don't see things written, I'm going to forget, and I assume everybody else might be forgetting them as well. I also tend to speak too fast. So if anybody feels this is too fast, please unmute yourself and stop me, because otherwise I can go even much faster. But who am I? So my name is Anita. I currently work as a Scrum Master for IDEX and Imana here in the Netherlands. And we used to work together with Jonathan at Bugaboo and also previously at Booking, where I was a Scrum Master for his development teams. So I have been going through quite a few team transformations and reorganizations. So he said this might be topic relevant for Luna and invited me to talk about. When I'm doing either Scrum Mastering or anything else, I really care about my colleagues' happiness and engagement. And this is why I think it's important to talk about how teams work together, because no matter how good you are as an individual, if you're not successful as a team, you would not really be able to perform further. And I also like to see people who are really proactive and who like to see improvements in their work. And again, I think you're not being proactive if you don't enjoy what you're doing and if you're not getting well along with your colleagues. Before joining IDEX or before working with Jonathan at Bugaboo, I was doing a bunch of other things. I don't want to get into details. You can look me up in LinkedIn if interested. But I do care about making sure that people are happy at their original workplaces, and I really care about people having a lot of freedom, and this is something I'll be touching a lot in the upcoming 1 hour as well, and this is why you see the word self-organization there. To start with, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me, by the way, because otherwise I'll go ahead. But I'm going to start with a question to you all. So think of, since the moment when you were born until 5 seconds ago, think of your best team you have ever worked in. Or it doesn't need to be a team. It can be a sport association. It can be an event you were organizing with friends. It could be your colleagues. Anything where basically 2+ people were working together. So think of the best example you can come up with. And now if you have an example in your mind, think about the question on why exactly you were choosing it. What made it the best? And I know it's subjective, but that's exactly the point. There might be reasons why you are calling it the best. And I want to hear a couple of those. So if we do have a brave volunteer who thinks that they know their best favorite team ever they have interacted with, can you tell what was the situation and what made you think of them?
Well, I can start with one example. I just thought about a team where I was working a lot of years ago when I started working in Deloitte in my professional career, and it was a license review team. So we were have to work long hours reviewing license over agreements and these kind of things. So it's kind of boring, but it was like we were like 4 people. I was like the project lead for these kind of things. I was working with people pretty much my age. You know, in these consulting companies, actually hierarchy it's pretty strict. So maybe you are just 1 year older, but you have like 3 people and you are the boss or something like that, right? And I pick up this example because we really had a lot of fun. We understand pretty good each other, so the communication was really good. So even though it was, let's say, hard work and also not the most interesting thing to read a lot of contracts and so on, but as a team, it was really effective. I mean, everybody understand each other, respect each other, and I think we were really successful in doing this kind of thing and working, let's say, in a really good way. So that's why I thought about this example.
Awesome. Thank you, Javier. I think that's a good start.
So I was on a development team. Actually, my first real programming job. It was only two of us for a long time, and then three of us. But we worked really closely together, and we were just able to sort of get in the groove together, such that we could share ideas easily, and we were just, I don't know, it was a really strong sense of camaraderie more than anything. I mean, we were productive, and that felt good. But there were times when we weren't productive, but it still felt good just because we were able to work together really closely. And I think it helped also maybe that we often drove together because we worked in a town an hour away, so we would often share the car. So it wasn't just a professional relationship. We spent a lot of time talking about whatever we talked about in the car, politics or the news or movies we watched or whatever it was. So it was just nice to have that sort of connection together.
Cool. Thanks a lot for sharing this. I think both examples are interesting because they closely relate with an example I wanted to share with you, which is not work related. So what you see here is a bunch of guys at a wedding and me. And in my free time, I give language classes once a week. And those 5 guys are some of my former students. We all are here at the wedding of another former student of mine. And I wanted to show you that my favorite team I chose was not work related. I have been giving language classes for around 5 years. And people have come and gone. Some of them have changed. But there is a reason I chose that as my favorite team. And that is because at first, we were choosing to go to this together. I'm giving the language classes voluntarily, and everybody is a volunteer to join. So it has been our own decision to work together. Nobody has been forced. Nobody needs to stay. If you can, you make it to the class. If you cannot come, you just don't come. We all have a common goal, which is I want to give them the language knowledge and that they all really want to learn. It's just crazy how much it can change when you all have the same goal in mind. We're all equal, and that means that nobody gets to choose when what gets done. We together decide at what time are we going to have lessons. We together decide what will be the housework. We decide how we're going to structure, and we often talk about it. And if sometimes we cannot do an agreement, everybody knows I have the final word, but simply because everybody trusts I have everybody's best interests in heart. And I really try not to use that a lot. At the same time, we are really diverse. There are a couple of people who talk a lot. There are a couple of people who are more silent. Some of them are good at grammar. Some others are good at talking in the language. Some are better at reminding each other about the homework. They have computer science backgrounds. They have background in philosophy. You name it. We're very different people. And also that makes us very strong because we complement each other a lot. There's always somebody who remembers that homework needs to be done. There's always somebody who makes us laugh. And that makes it all fun because if we are all the same, that would be so boring. At the same time, we have those standards that we have established together. So lessons are set at a certain time, they start at a certain time, they finish. We have the same structure. We start with looking at the homework, then we go through the lesson, then we do some homework for next lesson. We have drinks after every lesson. And obviously sometimes we fluctuate, but everybody knows what to expect. So you are mentally prepared for it. And most importantly, what both of you are mentioning, we also have fun together. We share fun messages in the WhatsApp. We talk about not only language related stuff. We share pictures when sometimes we go on holiday. So it feels like, although it feels like, yes, you go there and you are hard at learning, you also enjoy it. So it doesn't feel like a burden and it doesn't feel like it's something I must do. You do it because you want to. And all of those things are important for every team, in my opinion. If you want to be too productive, you need to have fun together. You need to have diverse people together. and everybody needs to feel that they are equal and it's a safe environment. What I want to talk a bit more and dive in deeps are thing called team development stages. And I'm gonna be sharing the presentation with Jonathan later, so all of you can get slides, because there are a couple of links with a bit more theory in behind. Before I talk about it myself, I should be looking at the camera and not at my phone, I was wondering if anybody has heard about the term team development stages, or has anybody seen the graph before?
No.
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 Okay,
Nope.
that is awesome, because then I can tell you everything and you're just going to believe whatever I say. So team development stages is this principle from, I think, 70s, but don't quote me of this, where the researcher was looking into how do the teams develop and what kind of a sequence they go through from the moment when they first start, and most importantly, what makes a team successful. And while he was researching and talking with loads of different teams and loads of different people, he came up with 4 stages, and all of the teams mostly go through them. It might depend on how fast they get from first stage to the last one, but all 4 are involved. The first stage is called forming, and as you notice, it talks about forming a team. Imagine it's your first day at a new office, and it's the same for your colleagues. So it means you're getting to know each other, you're really polite, you're touching the base and trying to understand who is going to be my next friend, how do we work together, what actually is happening here, what's the company about. And what usually happens, you're really polite, you don't object a lot. It's more like everybody's very careful not to offend anybody and just trying to understand. After some time that passes and you realize that person not really going to get very well with. The other person, we have very different opinions. So the next stage, what happens is storming, because there's a storm. You get different opinions about how to work, how to write the code. What time should we be having our stand-up? Should we be having our stand-up? Because maybe that's useless. And all of those different opinions, different personalities are coming to ground, and loads of things can be happening. Think about a couple of people who are very strong with their opinions, some others who never get to tell what they think. Some people might be very unhappy but never daring to talk, or everybody wants to talk and then nothing gets decided. Storming can take forever, basically. If you manage to pass this stage, and you would be surprised how many teams don't and always end up at storming, the next phase is norming, which is when you start looking at each other a bit realistic. Like, that guy will never be my best friend, but he has really good reasons to believe and talks the way he does. So I might start listening at him. And the other colleague, maybe we should give him a bit more space. Maybe we should change the way how we're doing our meetings so everybody gets a space to talk. Instead of having no agenda, maybe we should have agenda if some people prefer it. So that's when you start a bit understanding and appreciating each other. It doesn't mean you will always be the best friends ever, but it means you understand what is the role of each other in the team and how you can use each other's strengths. So you become a bit more predictable, so to say. After that stage has passed, the next stage is called performing, which means you're really good at what you do. You just continue being getting better and better, and you learn from your past mistakes. You make new mistakes, but not the same ones, and together you are starting to deliver your product faster, in better quality, and you also enjoy yourselves much more. There are a lot of other things what happen with teams. So, for example, imagine you are a team on a norming stage, everything is going great, but suddenly one new person joins the team, or a couple of people quit. And as soon as one person even changes the team, theoretically you go back to the forming stage, because each new person means the team is not the same, it's different people. And again, you might be going through the forming and through the storming phase. I need to drink a bit. There is also a research done that to be able to form a team, it takes up to 6 months. So if you have a team or a company where every few months you're getting new hires, it's really hard to get to the performing stage because you're still forming, you're still storming, and you're all the time trying to figure out what's the best way how to work together. And every new person joining has different opinions, has different ideas and different experience. So if you look at the big companies who have loads of employees and who can afford it, you often see that the way how they're structured is, you have one team with a set of people and they don't change for a couple of years. Any new hire who comes, they join to a new team made out of new hires, maybe with 1 or 2 seniors, and they stay in the same team for several years because that's how the team gets together. They get to know each other and they're able to move to the performing stage. And I could talk much more about this in length, but this was a pretty much short overview of team development stages because each of them has their pluses, their minuses, but it's important to realize that they exist. And before I go further, do you have any questions on the general idea of this? If no questions, then I will have a question for you. Before I go for my question, what I find a successful team is a team which is at the performing stage. It's a team where they have gone through everything what's bad, they have had a lot of battles, and they have survived together, and they are performing. And there are a lot of research done, and I have had a couple of links for you, which are saying that if you are happy at work, you are also producing better quality, you are more productive, and you're also delivering more. Even if you work the same hours, simply because you come to work with joy, and you know what's expected from you, you're working better. And that's important thing what I want to deliver to everybody when I talk about teams. When I talk about successful team, it's a team which is well established and which has worked together for a longer time, so we can really talk about how do we even make them successful and what do we need to do to keep them successful. So what I want to do now with you together is get a bit from your experience. I asked you to think about your favorite team. Most likely it was the team on the performing stage based on a couple of examples I heard. But you all remember those bad moments as well. You all remember the first time when you started in a new team. I'm sure you can remember a team where it went really bad. And you might also remember the times when from really bad, it went to okay-ish, or hopefully to really great. So what I want to do with you together, I'm going to be sharing 4 links, and I'm going to put them in the chat with the hopes that it works, in case if the Zoom chat function will be working. And I want to hear your ideas from your experience. How can a team get from one stage to another stage? So if a team is just forming, how can we get them to get out of it? How can we get them more comfortable so we start talking about the next improvements? And as you will see, you will be divided in 4 different groups. You will get a whiteboard where you just write as many ideas as you can for 5 minutes, and then we're going to be looking at them together and see what different patterns can we notice. You have got really good ideas, people, and I was so excited to see a lot of them here. So what we see here, how to get past the forming stage. You need time, you need have the same expectations. Above all, you need to communicate. Loads of team building, because that's the only way how to get to know each other. And it's important, it's not only fun related, but it's also work related. So to be able to work with each other, who prefers to have communication in email versus it being said face to face? Who likes to wake up late versus waking up early? Because that depends what times do you have your stand-ups. What kind of agreements do you have? How often are you going to be, for example, deploying? Or how often are you going to be showing demos to the customers? So a lot of agreements, what you will need to be talking. And you also need to be open-minded thank you for writing, because the more you talk with each other, the more you will realize the differences, and the more you will be coming to the storming phase. And what do we need to do to be able to talk, to get out of storming? We need to figure out what is the common goal and how do we all agree. So it's again all about communication. I cannot say it more. We need to remember what's the purpose and what's the common goal we have. We need to try to understand each other. So thank you for writing empathy and transparency, because if we are not going to be trying to come from the best place, you will always think somebody is trying to screw you. And believe me, nobody in this world is going to wake up with an idea, I'm going to be a bad person and make somebody else's day worse. People just don't do it. So even if you have different understandings, try to understand them and try to figure out how you will work together. Patience is important. Time is important. Remember, each stage might take 6 months. Might, not always. Can be faster, can be longer. That's the average. So that's the norming. And the question is, how do we, after norming, how do we remember that there is still the stage to get to performance? So again, time, getting to know each other, clarifying the working agreements, what we had when we were forming. Are they still valid? Do we still need to change something? Is there anything else we have learned about each other? And we still need to respect. And what's interesting and what you can see through all of them, there are a lot of patterns, what's important for each development stage. Last but not least, performing stage. We need to have team events, the same as for forming. We need to make sure, how are we still going to enjoy it? If you work on something for several years, how are you going to still find it interesting? So finding new challenges, finding interesting areas is still valid. And whoever draws a beautiful drawing, it's really cute. Thanks a lot. So I would like to summarize it, and I'm going to summarize with the next slide. All of the things what you guys were mentioning, how I summarize when I think about the different teams is, at all stages, you need to have clear boundaries. You need to have working agreements. How do you work so you know where you stand? You need to have common goals. You need to remember to celebrate even when you are storming. There are still things you can celebrate. You need to have certain ways how you work, certain traditions, stability so you know what to expect. You need to be giving each other feedback, not only feedback on when things have gone bad, but also feedback on what's really good at what you're doing and how can you keep up doing good. And Jonathan probably still remembers the presentation I was giving about feedback with colleagues back at the Boogaboo, where we were practicing. How do we even give each other feedback when we are never used to it? There is also a word called kickoff, which is important in the forming stage. So when you come together, if you never have a proper kickoff, you don't have a chance to start having those working agreements. So before you even form a team, it's important to understand, why are we together? What's our goal? What's our mission? And before you decide, let's have dailies at 10 o'clock, maybe let's talk. Maybe daily should actually be a different time if we want to have them at all. So having a proper kickoff is important so you can properly form a team. And it's important that a few of those things I saw across all the boards, because if you do it once, it's not enough. It's something you need to do on a regular basis. It's the same as a house. If you don't keep painting it or refurbishing or renovating, at some point it will fall apart. It needs regular love, the same as a team. And then obviously the question, okay, this is all beautiful, this is all great, but how exactly are we going to measure? And how do we know when we are at which stage? How do we know if the team is performing? We could be all having loads of fun, but so what? Is that enough to be able to say that we are bringing some money to our customers or to our company? So I wrote a few things from my side, and I'm happy to hear your opinions as well. Before we measure, when somebody from management comes to me and says, hey, we want to measure, I always ask them, okay, but why? And most importantly, what are you doing with this information? If you want to measure why, how happy are the customers or how happy are the employees, why don't make them happy every day? Why do we measure it only once a year? Let's figure out how do we make them happy and then keep building on it. Or if somebody says, I want to know what's the velocity of the team? Okay, but what are you going to do with it? I can tell you the number, but how is it going to help you? If you want to know and compare how good you have been delivering this month versus previous months, great. But once you have this information, what are you really going to do about it? And if nobody is able to give you the answer, don't measure it. You measure something because you want to make a change. If you are not going to make a change, then all this it's waste of time. And a lot of times you already know something, but it's more about validating. Like, I think we're working really fast and I want to confirm it. Or I think our customers are not happy and I want to confirm it. And then you have your idea and then you're like, I want to know how to make customers more satisfied. And I'm going to do it by ABC. And once you have this, you can go and look for the measures. After that has been clarified, a couple of ideas from my side on how to measure if a team is successful. And remember, I said that for me, successful team is a performing team. And a performing team is a team which is happy, which is proactive, which is engaged, with a couple of links I sent you. So I talked about the team's engagement. So the easiest is always ask them, how do they feel? How do they feel working with each other? What is working? What is not working? If you do qualitative analysis and you talk with every single team member, you will get quite a good overview of what's important and what's not. And even talking with each team member, let's say there's 7, you get 7 answers, you see patterns. That's your metrics, that's your analysis. It doesn't need to be complicated. If you do have bigger teams, 30, 40 plus people, there are a few other things you can do. Another thing what's important is that performing team and successful team is a team which is self-sufficient. Think about you're developing a product and you can do it on your own. You don't need to wait on a team B. You don't need to wait on a developer from a third party who is developing your API. You don't need to wait on a manager making a decision. Successful team is the one where they are on their own, they make all the decisions, and they can ship very easily. A lot of times that's not really the case because there is always another company who needs something, a different team who has DevOps engineers who need to do something. That's not self-sufficient team. Employee engagement surveys are something what people don't really like often, and that's something I personally enjoy a lot, and I try to do them very simple with my team, and I'm also going to show you an example in a minute where you can ask them simple questions. How happy are you to stay in the team? How likely it is that you will be leaving? How would you evaluate the way people are working with each other? So instead of looking at, hey, how many story points you have delivered, ask the team, because if they are happy, they will be delivering many more story points than the other team which is unhappy. So story points is not all the story. What you can also be looking is how many people are leaving the team. And you have probably all seen loads of LinkedIn information saying that people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad managers. So if your manager is taking care of the team and the team is taking care of each other, they will be staying and they will be trying to make work a better place. And by being happy and by staying, that already means that the team is performing and they are doing well. You can also obviously depends on where you're working, measure customer satisfaction, because customers will know the best if they like the product or not. You could be shipping one product every month to the customer, but if customer is not using it, what's the point of measuring it? What's the point of delivering something they don't care? And at the same time, you could be having very few customers who are always super angry. That's also not something you want. And a lot of all of this, what you see here, it goes about quality. Don't think about how fast somebody works. Think about if they're really adding a value, and ask the people who knows the best. And most likely, those are customers and those are your employees.
Anita,
Next.
One question is,
Sure.
Can you go back the previous one? If you are, for example, a team that is like more internal than external or client face, customer satisfaction, my understanding would be like other stakeholders within the company. For example,
Yes.
you can measure customer satisfaction in the sense of other departments that you, or divisions that you, or teams that you interact with, right?
That's correct. So for example, in my current team, we have a DevOps team, which consists of 2 DevOps engineers. They only work with other developers and QAs. So their customers are other developers and QAs.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Thank you for clarifying. So when I say a customer, I mean your team's customer and not the overall customer. So an example, what I was doing to measure, because I like to measure a lot. This is a survey I sent to my team 2 weeks ago, because I've been changing a lot of process, and I wanted to know if it works or not. And I wanted to know if it doesn't work, what doesn't work. We also changed the way from working from Scrum to Sprint, and there were quite a few people not liking it. But I wanted to know, is it just the loudest voices who don't like it? Are there people who don't say anything but actually like it? Or is it like nobody likes it, but they don't dare to talk about it? So I decided to back up my ideas with a couple of questions. I sent 12 questions in total for everybody. And you can see a couple of questions I wrote myself. And for example, for question number 12, it turned out a lot of people don't have a preference, which is fine. That means I, as a Scrum Master, get to make the final decision because that's my expertise. But for those people who did care, majority of them said they prefer to work with no sprints and they don't want to use Scrum. And those few people who wanted to use Scrum, they were just the loudest, which is also important because then I go and talk with them and say, what do you like about Scrum? What is there you want to keep? Because there might be things we might take of it. But I also know I don't need to listen to the loudest voices, because if I satisfy them, majority of my customers, and my customers are developers, QAs, product owners, they will not be satisfied. So this is an example for me how I try to make my development teams happy and backing it up with the data. And when management comes to me and says, let's do something like this and that, then I can show them the data and show them the satisfaction of our agile process and say, hey guys, based on my results, this is working. We don't need to be changing this. Or we can change it, but let's measure afterwards if it's working or not. Okay, so I have talked for 48 minutes, including technical issues, and I want to thank you for attention. I hope it did clarify how to make a team successful, which is, it's a lot of work, but it's going to pay off. It gave you a couple of ideas. And while I'm catching my breath, I really want to see if you have any more questions, thoughts, something you disagree. It's your time to talk.
I'm curious to hear what stage everybody thinks that the team that they're most closely related to is in right now.
My opinion is forming.
Yeah.
For now.
Is anybody not in the forming stage? I mean, we're a fairly new company with fairly new teams, so that probably is a good answer for everybody. But does anybody feel they're at the storming phase, or maybe they're starting to get there? Is there conflict arising? No, I need to start fighting with you guys more often.
Remember, if you're in the forming phase, that's also the phase where people are being still very polite and not always being very sure how to share their opinions, which some people are saying this is when you need to provocate them, because the faster you get to storming phase, the faster you get to perform. So if somebody is picking up discussions which are hard, that's actually really good, because it means this is how you will faster be coming to agreements. So if you are at the forming stage, guys, talk about hard things, talk about decisions which might not be comfortable, because it's going to be good for you in the long run. If you don't have other questions right now, there's my LinkedIn. Come and talk with me later.
Thank you
Have
very
a
much.
good evening or day, depending where you are. Bye.
Two.
For you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.